find myself back here again. I find myself noticing the small details that most people overlook these days, which is funny because that used to be how my modus operandi was for the longest time already. Time in and of itself seems different lately, and I think there might be even a noticeable difference in my cadence of speech, and my behavior is different. As of 2 days ago, I believe I started a recovery process, which hopefully will actually lead to the results that I've been thinking that I've been seeing, even though, who knows, it seems largely mental, my state of being right now, but I guess that's life, isn't it? Where everyone thinks a specific way, but it's a different way in the reality. I'm not entirely certain, but I guess certainty is something you don't really rely on for the first couple of stages of your life. You're more focused on experimentation, learning, adapting, and understanding rather than certainty. As it stands, I am living life alone again. I say alone. I'm alone save for the people who have been established and have been staying for the past several years. It is incredibly difficult for me to obtain new life in this life, as it were. Not very many people seem to fully appreciate me because perhaps I was largely an undefined to them and to myself. And now I find myself on the precipice. The so-called change that appeared to be before me beforehand and has insofar actually stayed largely outside of my grasp because I was deluding myself into believing things that weren't necessarily true, where now I have physical evidence as to changes. This voice log, it should even be enough of a physical change to be noticeable, although in what ways I'm not certain. If it's something that can be measured, I guess anything could be measured if you try hard enough. That's why there are so many different sciences, aren't there? I feel slightly overwhelmed, but I feel like I've been more overwhelmed in the past, and the answer isn't to simply have less problems. It's to become more adept at dealing with them. So, in truth, the world simply gets harder and harder, and then you die. So, but the more things that you have in your life, the more challenge there is, the more you are said to be quote-unquote living. Is that not true? I guess it depends on your definition of several things, but I would say that the classical definition of life is being able to live and adapt to what life is. So, am I living? Maybe. If so, am I living for the first time? Am I living sparsely in between points of not living? I suppose maybe that might be true, the sparsely part, because I'm not living. I'm not living, and I'm also not fully living. I'm at some weird in-between stage, which has been sort of my state of existence for the past time that I can remember. Now I'm attempting to find the answers. Again, I'm trying to find the questions, though, this time, because I feel that the question is just as important as the answer. If you're phrasing the question incorrectly, or you're asking the wrong questions, you're going to find answers that aren't helpful, or are potentially even harmful. So the question becomes, what is the question? Why is anything anything? Well, largely because it couldn't be anything else. Why do we exist? My state of being right now is something that feels the most out of my control that it's ever been, and then also simultaneously the most in control that it's ever been. The fact that I currently reside in my body is nothing short of a miracle after however many circumstances have befallen me up until this point. But it feels like, as opposed to having to constantly search, beg, borrow, and steal, it seems that the answers come to me. Regardless of what I do, I find the answers. And I have to potentially seek them out if it's a very strained situation or something outside of my purview. But by and large, that does not happen all that often. So in a way, I guess you could say that that is the true height of living, as it were. Man, time is so strange in this state of mind. Anyway, I think it's important to also acknowledge that, biochemically speaking, I am functionally more useful to people in this state. Everyone has been surprised, myself included, by the changes along the way. And sorry, I'm getting slightly distracted. My cat thinking about peeing on my clothes again. It even seems like the cats have noticed a difference, which is a weird thing to say, but coworkers, family, friends, acquaintances. Well, I wouldn't know. My acquaintances have been largely hiding away from me, so my acquaintances have not seen the difference, and I don't know if they ever will at this point, because they're all ghosting me, which is fine. I guess it just means it's time to make new acquaintances. Where do you find people? Everywhere. Nowhere. You find them by not looking for them, but you also don't find them if you're not looking for. It's a weird, complicated situation. The answers will come to me as long as I can form the questions. I feel that my state of being right now is at the forefront of what I have been wanting for the past few years, for the past few months at the very least, because I've been trying to, as it were, get a handle on things. And I now feel I have some quote-unquote competency. I feel like I've had the competency this whole time, but my confidence, or lack thereof, was crippling me. And this new state of mind might be the answer to almost every problem that I've had. Physical, mental, environmental, psychic, I guess, even if you consider that a thing. I feel, let me describe my state of being, shall I? I feel like I'm finally at one with the world, at one with the universe, at one with humanity. I feel an inner peace that is hard to otherwise acknowledge. I think this feeling is what most people describe as nirvana, or perhaps the ability to love oneself. I am now accepting that things are not always going to fall inside cookie-cutter situations, and that's fine. We don't live in a machine. We live in a world. The world is bounded, but not bounded by such things as exponentially higher belief. Trying to find words and understanding where they hadn't been before is what I am more or less setting my life towards. My state of being is aligned with trying to definitionally understand the world, trying to have a scientific approach, trying to potentially establish a new type of science along the way. And in failing to do so, not necessarily saying my time has been wasted, but that it has been applied in a way for me to understand, and then I could better apply it for others to understand in the future. As things stand right now, I have quite a bit of potential and things laid before me, and I need to not get comfortable, because I will get comfortable if I start taking these things for granted again, and I will. And then when I do, they'll disappear, because it's just the state of things. So either you have to pretend that they never existed to begin with, or you have to give them the full amount of attention that you feel they deserve. Half measures are useful in certain circumstances, half measures, but I do not believe state of living is one of them. Half measures in that state tend to lead to people being crippled for choice, have catastrophic events happen to their lives that they feel are out of their control, because you're not committing to one thing or another. You're committing to not commit, which is more or less an atrocity. It wastes everybody's time, including your own. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's yours to do what you feel with it. If you end up deciding that your life should be then dedicated towards not necessarily damaging others, but making them not have full use of their time, I mean, sure, whatever. But I have a very simple procedure that I wish to follow. I want to make people's lives better, and in failing to do strictly that, I want to reduce the suffering, the gross total suffering in the world. How does one go about doing this? Well, it depends on you. It depends on what your skill set is, what you can apply your skills towards in this world. Everyone brings something unique to the table, a unique perspective. People who think that their viewpoints are not useful need to speak up louder. And then there are those who feel that their viewpoint is the most important. They tend to have... It seems that most things in this world are opposite of their original intention. So, yeah, I want perhaps finding the answer then to how to reduce suffering is to do more research on what causes suffering, because that way you know what to avoid. Perhaps we need to find the leading causes of suffering to minimize, and they're extremely effective courses of propagating, doing what they do. Perhaps. Just a think, just a thought. Anyway, what is this cat doing? So, where does this leave us? This leaves me in a very interesting position where I've had the ability to do many things over the years, but I haven't given myself the ability to, and now I'm slowly transitioning into flexing my muscles and seeing what all my power is able to accomplish, and hopefully eventually gaining more as I go, so that I can more fully become who I am and accept my share of the burden of the world. Everything seems to be happening the right way. I don't know how or why, and And I don't know if I will ever see the opposite, where I feel everything is going the wrong way. But trying to assume such things would potentially be foolish and potentially be leading towards an understanding of the world that I don't really necessarily want right now. I have been trying to live in the future, and it has done me zero favors. So I'm going to live as far in the future as is possible, which is to live for the now, but plan for the day. And then, hopefully, also realize that anything outside of that also does still exist. I am in school and work. But I also still have a decent amount of free time. So what do I do with this free time? Well, I can finally allow myself to relax, as opposed to treating the free time as something I should be guilty for. Or I could set aside, say, an hour a day of the free time to be productive within, so that I still feel I'm accomplishing something, but also have the ability to relax. That sounds like a really good idea. But how does one research something that feels like it comes on whenever it does? I think that the answer to that might be simply to start with a plan and then work towards that plan an hour a day. And then if it goes over or under that, from then forward, be okay with the circumstances and be willing to work with myself, as opposed to trying to constrain myself to a specific set of routines, blocks, etc. Things are, well, things could be better, but that's just simply the state of existence. Things could also be worse. I feel greedy because I end up aiming very high. I end up aiming for the ultimates. Whereas I should aim probably like 2 ticks above my station as it is currently. I am, as it stands, I am much better off now than I was this time last year, for sure. Even though I am still working on my confidence. Physically, mentally, emotionally, sociologically, I have much more. I've been following some of the plans. I've only started laying some of them out recently. This has been one of the most massive changes to my state of being in years, and it has been incredibly fruitful. And I was beating myself up for it not being fruitful enough, whereas I should relax and allow myself to be. I feel that's the answer to my life right now. Having the ability, learning the ability to finally relax and allow myself to be me, with my flaws, with my strengths. Don't be afraid of the flaws, and don't be afraid of the strengths. It's quite simple. Because both of those things were things that I was afraid of. I was afraid that both of them would be things that would draw people away, when really, that ends up being what draws people in. The differences between people, the erratic tendencies, not the person that you put forward because you're trying to impress people, or that's what I do, accidentally, unconsciously, half the time, because I'm terrified of losing people. I'm terrified of making friends and then losing them. And that's exactly what happens because of the fear. So now, I must instead define myself properly and be true to who I am, not true to what others want me to be. And people will leave, but that's normal. And people will also come with me, and that is also normal. And then there will always be those who will stay by my side no matter what, because we've got history. Those people, thank you. You will probably never hear this unless it ends up in some sort of history book somewhere, which I doubt. But my dream is still the same dream that I've had since we were children. I want for us to have a place where we can call our home. and where all of us can self-actualize.